A lot of people don't know what foundations are. A foundation essentially is a combination between a trust and a company.
Who's the typical candidate for a foundation?
Any person who owns real estate in the UAE should seriously consider.
There is DIFC foundations, ADGM foundations, and why would anyone come to the RAK ICC and set up a foundation?
RAK ICC.
Wills, you can still have the assets owned by you. Beneficiaries will have to go through the probate process. In the case of foundation, the beneficiary continues to reap the benefits.
The foundation has a number of layers. Somebody set it up, the founder, somebody benefits from it, the beneficiaries. Beneficiaries can be, again, same person as the founder, and somebody managing the assets, the council, and there's a guardian who oversees everything.
We've done significant number of foundations in the UAE, through InZone, of course, and one of the issues that we commonly face is the property ownership.
We have been in recent discussions with the Dubai Land Department, and
Last week, we covered estate planning in the UAE through wills. We talked about wills in great detail and how Muslims and non-Muslims can both register their wills in the UAE and protect their families and assets. We also talked about foundations very briefly, because foundations is an important tool to protect the assets and to plan for the future. And I had promised that I will bring in a very special guest to talk to us about foundations, and who better to have than someone who sits at the helm of a government department that actually registers foundations in the UAE. I am actually very proud to have Sandra Louw, who is the CEO of Ras Al Khaimah International Corporate Center, in our podcast today. Welcome, Sandra.
thank you so much from my side for both having me here today as well as raising awareness on such an important topic.
It is an important topic indeed. So we talked about wills in the last episode, and we realized that given the number of expats in the UAE, which forms about 90% of the population, there's very little awareness about the topic, and not many people actually think about having wills registered in the UAE. And when it came to foundations, we really thought that even there is lesser amount of awareness about foundations, and we wanted to have you here talk about it and explain to us how people can utilize foundations as part of their estate planning, protection of assets, inheritance, continuity, and to ensure that their wealth is well managed during their lifetime and afterwards.
You have said two very important words. When it comes to wills, they form such an important basis for essentially estate planning. You are forced to face your mortality and think about what will happen after you're gone. Foundations do the same thing, but it does more. Foundations allow you to start to plan your estate, essentially everything that you own today, and thinking about the legacy that you're building, how you will manage this legacy during your lifetime and beyond your lifetime for the generations to come. And I think this is the major difference between the two. They are complementary to each other, but foundations start while you're still around. You dictate how it is set up, how it will be managed. You have time to still amend what is going to happen, and that peace of mind, not for you, but for the people that you love.
Before we move on, I have one simple question for you. Are you ready to take on and start your 10x journey? If yes, hit that subscribe button now. Because in every episode, we're diving deeper and deeper into mindset shifts, success strategies, and real stories to help you think bigger and grow faster. Are you in? If yes, subscribe now, and let's take this journey together. Absolutely. I mean, for the audience sake, in case if they haven't watched the previous episode, will is a document essentially which lists your wishes in terms of what would happen to your assets in case you pass away. And if you have children, you would appoint guardians or guardian for your minor children who would take care of the children in your absence. So on the other hand, foundation is something which is registered in a different way completely, which in my understanding, it'll take away the process of probate, of taking the will to the court to have it implemented. I mean, if something happens to an individual, which is the founder, in the case of a foundation, the foundation just continues. And you don't need to go to the court at all to have anything done there, right?
And you're touching on quite a few of the differences between the two. What I mentioned about you essentially starting to plan your estate whilst you're around to do it. It's a combination between, a lot of people don't know what foundations are necessarily, but they know what a company is.
Correct.
A foundation is almost like a company. You establish it, you set it up, you transfer some assets across to it, or you build assets within it. But it does not require you to have probate. If you have a company, then you have a shareholder. So essentially, ultimately, as an individual person, you're still owning the asset indirectly.
Correct.
But with a foundation, you really give the asset away. There is no shareholder, but you retain some level of control, as much or as little as you need, by acting on the council or retaining some what is called founders' rights. Some rights as the person who founded that foundation. And so it starts to work during your lifetime. But then, as you mentioned rightly, at the point in time when events that we don't want, but we all know eventually will happen, there is no holding up of the assets, freezing of assets, probate, expensive and time-consuming and sometimes traumatic events, that there is a seamless legacy that is passed on without the interference of courts.
Absolutely correct. So, we do a lot of wills for expats in the UAE. Now, what comes to my mind for the audience understanding is that in the case of a will, one has to go through the probate process, as I've mentioned earlier, which means that all the assets are frozen, and if there is a bank account, it'll be frozen. No one has access to the bank account until the court passes an order based on the will or the instructions provided in the will, and it is at that point in time that you have access to the funds. In the case of a foundation continues to live.
Yes. I think we should also add what is the most common other asset that people have.
Correct.
And that is real estate.
Real estate is another
Same
one,
thing.
yes.
You need to, in the case of a will, you need to, the executor and trustee of the estate needs to go and transfer that property to the heirs or the beneficiaries of the estate. With a foundation, the property continues to remain in the foundation. You just change the beneficiaries of the foundation from one generation to the next without any need for re-registration or legal process to go through.
Absolutely correct. And that would also include, in that case, we've talked about the bank accounts, properties. It could also include intellectual property rights or any other assets that can potentially be owned by a foundation.
Company
Could be
shares.
vehicles, company shares, anything that can be possibly owned by an entity. In this case, it's a foundation. That's very clear. Now, a lot of people talk about trusts at the same time as an alternate or something that goes hand in hand with wills.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the UAE, historically, we've seen that trusts have not been accepted here. There were perhaps regulations around trusts in the DIFC at some point in time, but in my understanding, trusts do not really go hand in hand with the Sharia law, and there were restrictions around the creation of trusts under the Sharia law or the UAE laws, and that's the reason that the UAE came up with the idea of foundations.
I think it goes a little bit further than that.
Okay.
Or is a slightly different angle from which it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
The UAE has what is called civil law,
Mm-hmm.
and trusts are a typically common law
Mm-hmm.
principle.
Correct.
Now, from From a religious point of view, it's actually quite neutral. It is possible to create a trust that is subject to Sharia law. It is something that I've personally been involved with a lot before I came to the UAE. Foundations are just really well known in this part of the world, and I think one of the reasons why foundations here is so popular and is continuing to develop so fast is that if I look at trusts, it's a very old concept. It started in the Middle Ages with the Knights Templar going off and leaving their families behind, and then evolved in, as I mentioned, common law countries. Most civil law countries, even in modern times, as well as older, but it's a much more modern concept. A foundation essentially is a combination between a trust and a company. So it mimics what a trust does, but it has modern features such as ownership. A trust is a relationship between a trustee, a settlor, and the beneficiaries. You've got distinct different parties. When you transfer assets into the trust, the trustee owns the assets. The trust doesn't. The trust does not have its own separate existence. A foundation has its own separate existence, just like a company does. The foundation
It is
registered.
incorporated, essentially.
It's incorporated. It is registered. It has. It is the owner of the assets within. It has a council that is almost like directors of a company, and you can also put a guardian, for example, in there to protect the interests of the beneficiaries. So it is a mix between a company and a trust. It mimics a trust, but it has the concept of legal ownership, and it is a very, very strong asset protection tool. I do not believe that a trust or foundation, that the one or the other is better or worse than each other. They are slightly different, and each of them have a very important part to play in estate planning and in asset protection for clients, depending on where in the world they find themselves in and what it is that they want to achieve. So both are extremely good, but in the UAE, we were able to borrow the best features of foundation law from all the major jurisdictions around the world. It's a relatively modern law, so it takes all these wonderful estate planning features, asset protection features, registration features. It has a very strong legal framework around it, which actually makes it, at this point in time, I would say the leading foundation jurisdiction in the world.
You've raised so many points. I'll come back to them one by one. So now foundations, as we understand, it's a civil law concept. Trusts are essentially common law. So
and there is a little UAE aspect to it that I'm sure you're going to come to about the laws.
Yeah, sure.
Common law, civil law.
Yeah, go ahead.
The great thing about the UAE foundations is that although foundations originated as a civil law concept, and what do we mean with that? We took something, like I said, in a common law, which is where you don't have to write it down for it to exist. And we created a specific piece of legislation around it. So there's a clear legal framework around it. And yet, the three jurisdictions within the UAE where you can utilize foundations, DIFC, ADGM, and RAK ICC. DIFC and ADGM have their own common law courts. Now, for international use, this is very important to clients. And RAK ICC has the ability to choose which one of those two common law courts they can access. So it may originally have been a civil law concept, but it is subject to common law. It's very technical. At the end of the day, I think what is important for people to know is that it is a registered vehicle that provides you with asset protection during your lifetime and also with a long-term legacy plan and estate plan.
That's absolutely fine. Civil law, common law, whatever the background is. At the moment, we have foundations available in the UAE, which are registered like companies where you can have your assets transferred, be it real estate, bank account, intellectual property, company ownership, which is the shares,
Yes.
and you can use it as estate planning, asset protection, and whatever continuity planning that you have as an individual or as a group of companies, I believe. So that is very, very clear now. So you've also mentioned now that there is DIFC foundations, there are ADGM foundations, and of course there are foundations available overseas as well. Why would anyone come to the RAK ICC and set up a foundation here? You mentioned that it's one of the leading jurisdictions. I would like to know why and how.
Before I start with RAK ICC, I think when international clients start looking around the world where their choices are for foundation, the UAE comes up as one of the strongest jurisdictions. And then we delve into, is it ADGM, DIFC, or RAK ICC?
That's right.
And the only 3 jurisdictions within an environment where there are 46, 47 different free zones, only 3 of them really have this incredibly powerful wealth planning, estate planning, asset protection tool. Now, when it comes to the differences between the 3 of them, I would say that RAK ICC provides the greatest level of flexibility. I mentioned already the choice of accessing the common law courts of either DIFC or ADGM. They also have a level of privacy, I think, is often an aspect that's important to people. It is well regulated like all the jurisdictions in the UAE, but there is no public register of any part of the client's information. So the name and address of the founder, for example, there is no public register for it, which is available in the DIFC ADGM. The name of the registered agent and so forth, there's just absolutely no public register. An interested party may request information about the management of a foundation, but it is not public, and they do need to justify why they want the information. So that is another extremely important difference between the 2. When it comes to aspects around asset protection, the DIFC did update and amend their laws and regulations last year to introduce what are called firewall provisions. And what that means is that they do not recognize foreign judgments. So if somebody wants to attack the assets within a foundation and a foreign court or a client with a foreign court judgment comes and says to the DIFC or the UAE registrars, here is something I want you to enforce. At RAK ICC, I can give you a little bit of an advance heads up. Our regulations amended our regulations as well, bringing in extremely strong asset protection clauses. But
do you want to speak about those amendments at this stage? Or
essentially, just to say that our asset protection features are being updated to be as strong as pretty much any jurisdiction around the world, with a huge amount of clarity around not the non-recognition of foreign judgment and the asset protection it provides, as well as statutory limitation of a period when somebody can come and bring a claim against the foundation, and quite a few other smaller but very important aspects, which we will definitely be announcing very shortly.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. I think it'll just improvise and give more clarity in terms of what can and what cannot be done and what to expect from the RAK ICC foundations, right?
Yes, this is good not just for RAK ICC, it is good for the UAE.
Absolutely.
Collectively, the UAE is known for foundations that provide a high level of asset protection, a high level of flexibility, a high level of regulatory clarity.
Yeah.
And yes, RAK ICC, I believe, will be at the forefront of these features that are
important. That's very interesting development, I would say. Now, another development that we've been keenly looking for has been that, because we do foundations and we've done significant number of foundations in the UAE through InZone, of course. And one of the issues that we commonly face is the property ownership.
Oh,
yes. DIFC, of course, DIFC foundations can own property directly in the Emirate of Dubai. RAK ICC, we have to have a structure around, for example, setting up a vehicle under the foundation. Foundation owns the offshore company, and an offshore company owns the property or real estate in Dubai. And this is seen as a bit of an impediment and, something of a shortcoming for a RAK ICC foundation. How are you working around to sort of, to ease things out on this? Because we've seen a lot of comment, a lot of comments from our clients who've been insisting that, they should be able to directly own assets, in this case, the real estate in Dubai, through the RAK ICC Foundation.
You're absolutely right. Up till now, I think the only way that somebody could put Dubai land, in particular, within a RAK ICC foundation was to create a RAK ICC IBC, an international company, place the property inside that company, and then the shares of the company could be held by the RAK ICC foundation. That's not changing. As far as using companies to hold real estate, it is still an incredibly good tool to separate the ownership of different portfolios of real estate, for example. But many wealthy individuals have only one, maybe two properties. And we have been in recent discussions with the Dubai Land Department. And again, you're one of the first people. It's very coincidental we're speaking today. The Dubai Land Department and RAK ICC has entered into an agreement, or we have reached agreement, that Dubai Land will in future be possible to be held directly by a RAK ICC foundation.
That'll be fantastic.
Yes. So
I guess this is coming up soon, right?
Oh, it will be published very soon. It has already been agreed. We're going through the closing process of signing the necessary memorandum of understanding and amending it to reflect this agreement. That is a huge
development in my view. I mean, because a lot of people have been asking for it. A lot of people. And
it's not just that. You asked about some of the benefits that RAK ICC has, maybe, or how it differentiates or differs from ADGM and DIFC. I believe that RAK ICC foundations will now be the foundation within the UAE with the greatest flexibility of real estate ownership. Whether you purchase a real estate in the Emirate of Ras Al Khaimah, where there is a huge amount of property development happening, or you purchased real estate in Dubai, you will be able to use this one vehicle, this one foundation, to either hold the property directly at the level of the foundation, or, as I mentioned, the use for underlying international business companies is not disappearing, but there is now greater flexibility. And I think the word flexibility and choice sums up the real advantage of a RAK ICC.
Absolutely. Foundation. I mean, if this is done, and assuming it is going to be done, as you've rightly said, very soon, I think there's going to be a lot of traction towards RAK ICC Foundation, and it'll make our lives easier in terms of explaining the structures available to our clients. So that's a huge development. So for anyone who's looking for estate planning in the UAE, or asset protection, or legacy, and any related area, they will have to consider setting up a foundation within the UAE.
Yes, and beyond property, shares within. So if you have companies, or if you want to register investments such as shares in overseas foundations, which is possible, you have a huge administrative burden with things like super legalization. So the ownership of assets within the UAE, really, I want to say there's no more perfect solution than creating a foundation. It is practical, it is flexible, it is in every aspect possible superior to what you can do abroad for the UAE resident as well as for non-residents.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. In terms of the taxation, now, since foundation is a registered entity, just like a company, what is the treatment of tax in the UAE? I mean, do you have to register for corporate tax?
Income tax. So there was a very significant development towards the end of last year. I think it was November 24, where the classification of, or you differentiate when you have a foundation, whether it is a family foundation or not. Family foundation essentially something that you set up for, the governance and the estate planning of a single individual or their immediate family. These are acknowledged and treated as so-called flow-through vehicles, and it is another real benefit of a foundation. So even if you own assets that would maybe ordinarily be subject to corporate income tax within an underlying company, if it is the type of activity which otherwise, if you had done it in your personal name, in very short, using a family foundation is a very effective way to create a more robust estate plan without increasing your tax burden and, in fact, being able to optimize your overall tax.
Now, in terms of the structure of a foundation, let's go back to wills versus foundations. What a foundation doesn't and will not cover is the appointment of a guardian for minor children. For that reason, you'd have to have a will in place together with a foundation if you were to go for a foundation as a structure.
Yes.
Right?
Because the foundation will be working or will be putting the governance in place for assets. Your
Correct.
private life, your family, personal affairs,
Correct.
like guardianship of children, absolutely right, is so important. How many people are within the UAE? You mentioned at the start of our conversation, 10% of the population only being local. The other 90% very often have no extended family in the UAE, very often have young families. And
This is a typical family
without
structure here.
some
2 or
kind
3
of
children.
additional legal mechanism to ensure that things like guardianship is taken care of, it does leave you vulnerable and leaves your family vulnerable.
Now, who's the typical candidate for a foundation? And at what point in time, if I were to personally look at setting up a foundation for myself? I mean, I've done a will recently, and this idea was actually floating in my head. But I would like to understand this from you. At what point in time an individual should consider a foundation?
Any person who owns real estate in the UAE should seriously consider owning that real estate either directly in a foundation or indirectly through an IBC, obviously needing to look at their overall personal circumstances. So people who have accumulated wealth within the UAE should really consider a foundation from a number of points of view. The one is, ideally, everybody should also have a will. I think even if you don't have a foundation, you should have a will. You're doing such good work in creating awareness about this. But even with a will, if you think about things like asset protection, opening up your estate, namely the shares that you hold if you have a company, the real estate you hold, the bank accounts that you have, these are subject to local inheritance laws if anything ever happens to you. So set aside for the moment the very important asset protection aspect. So foundations can be subject to either Sharia law, or you can decide
You can
within the
choose.
foundation.
Yeah.
You have a huge amount of flexibility how it will pass from one generation to the next. Then the other aspect around expats that I feel they forget about is they're here, they're working, they're generating income and assets, they're building a legacy. And there's no tax here, there's no estate taxes here. But the reality for a vast majority is that at some point they will return back to their home country, if I can call it that. And then you do become subject to the taxes of that country. And if you have built up your legacy, your assets within your own estate, in your personal name, everything is completely wide open for the taxes of where you are going in the world. Even if you just maybe, a lot of executives, professionals, I take myself as an example. I've lived in many countries around the world. Every time I move from one country to another, I'm exposing myself to a whole new set of laws that impact on my estate. So with a foundation, what you're doing is you're taking your valuable assets, your legacy, and you continue to build on it, but outside of your immediate own personal name. So you move from one country to the next, and the assets remain within a legal structure that is registered in the UAE. So you don't as easily take it outside of the net of this protection.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, of course, you need to take advice from the relevant jurisdictions wherever you're moving to, so that it remains compliant.
It is not simplistic, but the overall concept is there. And just as people should think about wills for their private circumstances, you asked who is the typical person who should consider a foundation. Any person who is starting to build some level of assets, property ownership, companies, shareholder, building up their wealth in the UAE, should consider it. There is no specific level. There's not a magical number that I can give you. Once your assets hit a net value of, this is when you need to think about it. It is more subtle than that. It is thinking about, what are my risks? Do I have something that is worth protecting? Do I have external creditors? And you do need to think about separating your commercial manufacturing wealth, making that. And people think if they have a company, it is protected. To some extent, yes. But ultimately, the value of that company sits in the shares. And if you're personally holding it, it is still exposed. The same with real estate. All of that is sitting in your house, in your own name. So now you need to start to think about, do I want to separate my personal assets from my business assets? You can't do that if you own everything in your own name.
Yeah.
So anybody who is in the process of generating assets, who is exposed to business risk, and concurrently have some personal assets, including bank accounts, really should start to consider speaking to a wealth planner, speaking to somebody who is knowledgeable about estate planning, because these are not things we think about every day.
Absolutely. So unlike wills, they're available, generally speaking, for expats, right? Be they Muslim or non-Muslims, they can go with the DIFC or ADGM. Foundations are also available to the UAE nationals, right?
Correct.
So it's regardless of the religion, regardless of the nationality, you can still have a Sharia compliant foundation. Of course, I think you need to have a Sharia scholar on the foundation who can actually direct towards the constitution of the foundation, which is in this case, it has to be Sharia compliant, right?
Right.
So
So it's all in the detail.
correct.
It is not it's a vehicle that's incredibly inclusive, is incredibly customizable. It can be adapted to your values, your religion, your personal circumstances, your business
Correct.
thoughts. It can even be used for philanthropic purposes.
Absolutely. So philanthropy, I mean, you can set up a foundation, which is either for continuity, business protection, legacy building. You can have a philanthropic foundation within the RAK ICC, I believe.
Absolutely. I
And
think all three of the jurisdictions.
correct. But you
will allow
need to
that.
comply with the UAE laws in general, because there are certain laws which require certain compliance, I believe.
Correct.
When it comes to
there's
philanthropy.
definitely a little bit more thought you need to put in it, like you need to do with any philanthropic vehicle that you establish. So a couple of more probably regulatory, legal aspects around it, but in principle, you can set it up for philanthropic or charitable purposes.
Right. So let's talk about the general structure of the foundation. So if I am to set up a foundation, I will be called a founder, in my understanding.
Yes.
Just like a business, I mean, you can be called a founder, but in this case, I will set up the foundation as a founder. What else do I need to keep in mind in terms of the overall structure of the bylaws and the charter of the foundation?
The foundation has a number of layers. You do start off with a founder. The founder is the person who has assets and decide to establish the foundation. The founder then transfers ownership of the assets to that foundation, and you sever the ownership completely. From that point onwards, the foundation is almost like a company. It owns the assets in its own name. Now, who manages these assets? This is the council. It is very similar to the directors of a company. The council could consist of one individual. It could even be the same person as the founder. It could also be somebody else, and it could be a board. It could, like a board of directors, could be a number of persons or even legal entities with complementary skills. Then you obviously want these assets to be managed and to benefit somebody. The beneficiaries. Beneficiaries can be, again, the same person as the founder. The beneficiaries very often in most sort of family situations consist of husband, wife, children, and you can state the order in which they will benefit as well, or who will replace them if any one of them are not available or there at the time they were supposed to benefit. So then you also have a guardian, and ultimately the guardian has a role where they ensure it's a mechanism of oversight over the council. So the 3 layers, somebody set it up, the founder, somebody benefits from it, the beneficiaries, and somebody managing the assets, the council, and there's a guardian who oversees everything.
If something happens to me, I am the founder, I'm the council member, I am the guardian, I am the beneficiary. If something happens to me, I can have a mechanism put in place of alternate beneficiaries, just like a will, for example.
Just
right?
like a will.
Just like a will.
You're right. Whether it's a will, whether it's a trust, whether it's a foundation, the overall concept is who should benefit from the assets and the income within this foundation. If you want that to be yourself, it could be you. Within the UAE, that's not problematic. If you have other international considerations, you need to look at how these other residencies may impact on that decision. But ultimately, who do I want my assets to pass to? Who would I like to enjoy the benefits of the assets within the foundation? Because it's also not a case. So with a will, when somebody passes, the assets get transferred to those beneficiaries.
Correct.
The typical situation, a couple with children, and let's assume the children are adults for a moment to take away another layer of a conversation. Once mom and dad is no longer there, naturally the children in whichever percentage will receive the assets, and they will be physically transferred to those children in their names, and the cycle starts all over again.
Correct. That is in the case of will.
That's with a will,
Yes,
correct.
yes.
With a foundation, what happens is the asset remains within the foundation. There's no transfer of the asset. The only thing that happens is where mom and dad's names were there as the beneficiaries in the past, the children now start to take their place, if that's what you want in a very typical situation. And they do not need to receive the assets physically in
it's
order
the benefit.
to enjoy the benefit.
Yeah.
So they get all the wonderful benefits of that comes, and the security that comes from a solid asset base, without any of the disadvantages and claims and challenges that comes from life, where creditors could attack those assets, where you can mix up your business and your personal assets and lay them open to attack. So you get all the benefits, all the advantages, without any of the need to transfer the assets and them having to do.
So in that case, if I've had multiple alternate beneficiaries, let's take the example of a will. We'll draw a parallel here. So in the will, if I put my wife as the beneficiary, I can do that in the foundation as well. If she's not there in the will, I've appointed my children as the alternate beneficiaries. In the foundation, we can do the same, right?
Correct.
So,
and you have, sorry to interrupt you there, you even have the ability to name individuals or to name a class of beneficiaries.
okay.
The options are endless, literally.
Right. So you can choose whatever you would like to choose. The example I was coming to And to also connect the dot between the will here, if the children end up being the beneficiaries and that clause is triggered in the foundation, then it's important to have the council members as well appointed as well in the form of the people who would take care of those children through a will. They need to be appointed as the guardians in a will as well, so that they're not only the guardians of those children, they're also managing those assets through the foundation's council effectively, so that the children have some consistency in terms of the management of their assets and their well-being.
I would like to slightly disagree with you on that point.
Mm-hmm.
I believe when you make the decision in your will as to who are the guardians of your children, you think about who is going to be nurturing and caring and a mother or a father figure to my children and guide them through the values of life and the challenges of life, but from a very nurturing point of view.
Mm-hmm.
You do not necessarily need to have that value or that part or skill, because it is a skill in your council member. Your council member, what you are looking for is somebody who is legal and business savvy and understand investments and have a more business mind, if I can put it that way. But what you need to do is you need to make sure that they are that your charter, that your foundation is established in a way that there is a governance where the council members have a way to be in contact with the guardians. So although your children are the beneficiaries, it doesn't mean that the council just have to distribute money whenever a child makes a request or when they're asked to do so. In a very good governance structure, you will have a mechanism to ensure that the business people are talking to the nurturing people, understand what is the real need, and that the nurturing person doesn't come and ask for a huge amount of money that the foundation cannot afford in that point in time. You need to strike a balance between the two.
And that's a very,
I'm very sorry, but I do believe
absolutely
it's
agree
two
with
very,
you on
very
that point,
different characteristics you're looking for.
I'll connect the dot here. So absolutely correct. I think in that sense, I mean, the guardian appointed in the will also needs to have some sort of sensible understanding of property management, for example, or if something is left behind of value, which has to be managed for the minor children.
Yes.
Right. So I absolutely agree with you on that.
This goes to the core of estate planning, which is an absolute skill which you're a specialist in. You need to think what it is that each individual, what will be their role, what it is that I expect them to do, and that you play to their strengths.
Yeah.
And if somebody has a strength in both sides, then fantastic.
Absolutely. You'd be better off finding an individual who could actually do both roles or play both roles. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. If the individual who's appointed as the guardian has no understanding of any business management, would find it hard to actually run the foundation.
Here comes the benefit of foundation.
Yes.
You do not need just one council member.
Yeah.
You can put together almost like a board of directors. You can put together a combination of individuals with complementary skills. That is how the board of any company works. So again, it depends on the overall size of your foundation, the types of assets that are in there, your personal circumstances. But when you talk about an expat or an individual that has an estate where the person that is very close to the family that the children look towards as the typical sort of guardian situation, and they happen to also be somebody that's has the right kind of skills to take over the management of the assets and to utilize them correctly and make the right decisions. That is the ideal situation, but the benefit of a foundation is if that is not your situation, you can adjust and adapt. And even if you start out with that situation, you can add people later.
So the trigger mechanisms in terms of the appointment, the actual taking over of the council would take effect upon the death of the founder. In this
Again,
case,
not necessarily.
not necessarily. Okay.
Oh, there are an absolute vast number of
I'm talking about the
options.
alternate council
the
members.
So basically, you're talking about my replacement. You absolutely nominate that upon within the that you nominate. When I'm not around to do this, I want this person to take my place. Yes, whatever it is that you described, that is what will happen.
So the key takeaway that I take from this conversation is that foundation is all about continuity. Wills, you can still have the assets owned by you, but of course you'll have to go through, your beneficiaries will have to go through the probate process.
You're
In
right.
the case of foundation, the council members will run the foundation, and it all boils down to ensuring that the beneficiary continues to reap the benefits of the foundation, of the assets that are accumulated within the foundation, and these assets need to be maintained and run efficiently by the council members. And choosing the right council members is the absolute key here. Please.
That is such a perfect summary. A will is something that you need for one moment in time.
Yeah.
A foundation is something that you can have a hand in putting in place, running, shaping, and ensuring that that continuity is there, that there is protection during your lifetime and beyond, and choosing the right partners, the right council members, absolutely important.
Well, thank you so much. That's a very, very solid message towards the end. Thank you so much, Sandra, for joining me today.
Thank you very much. It is such a pleasure to speak with you.
Likewise.
And experiencing your knowledge.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Likewise. I created Think and Grow 10X because I believe that everyone has the potential to break through barriers and to achieve extraordinary success. If this video today brought you closer to your goals, then give it a like and share it with someone who's ready to take their journey of growth. Until next time, keep believing, keep thinking, and keep growing 10X.